This is part two of my dream, the perfectionism sermon. So I looked at all of the different books of the Bible that had at least 36 chapters, which was Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Job, and Second Chronicles. Because in that video, I mentioned that we were reading the book of Matthew. However, the book of Matthew only has 28 chapters, and I mentioned in the dream that chapters 29 through 31 were long, but we were going to stop after chapter 35 or 36. And given that I have read all of those books, with the exception of Second Chronicles, I went ahead and read Second Chronicles chapters 29 through 36, which it only has 36 chapters. So this is talking about the kings of Yasharel, beginning with Hezekiah, right? So Hezekiah started reigning when he was 25 years old, and he did what was right in the eyes of Yahweh and according to all that his father David did. And so, what he did in the first year of his reign is that he repaired the house of Yah. He, got all of the Levites together, he got all the priests, and they cleaned the temple and they celebrated the Passover, which they hadn't done in forever, right? And so a lot of what Hezekiah did during his reign is he wanted everything to literally be by the book, to be perfection all the way through. So, they had the Torah and they celebrated the Passover, they got the temple ready, they did the animal slaughterings, all of that. Everything had to be perfect, right? They brought 7 bulls and 7 rams and 7 lambs and 7 male goats. And we know that the number 7 means completion, right? Perfection, completion, like everything is done, right? Because Yah made the world in 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested. Everything was complete and perfect. That is what that perfection is. And so it talks about how they slew the bulls and the priests received the blood and sprinkled it on the slaughter place. All of those things he appointed the Levites in the house of Yah with cymbals and harps and lyres, according to the command of David and of Gad, seer of the sovereign, and of Nathan the prophet, for the command was by the hand of Yah, by the hand of his prophets. So this is all of chapter 29. And he gave the order to offer the ascending offering on the slaughter place, and they were singing and they had the trumpeters blowing and everything, like everything was perfect. He was like, no, we are going to go back to how our fathers were. We're going to go back and do how David did, because David, he was a good king, with the exception of Bathsheba, but he was a good king. And Hezekiah was like, no, I want everything to be just like it was, just like it had been during the time of David. They were blessed. Like Yah provided for them. There was always provisions. They did not go without. Everything was just complete perfection, right? So he sent all Yasharel and Yahuda and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh to come to the house of Yah at Jerusalem. However, they couldn't because they were not prepared. They had not cleansed themselves. So if you don't know about the Passover, Yah had told them about the Passover, which is supposed to be in the first month. And then he was like, but if y'all can't do it in the first month, I'm going to give y'all a second chance to do it in the second month. And so that's what they did. They celebrated the Passover in the second month. And they're like, fine, y'all haven't cleansed yourself. That is perfectly okay. Okay. So they have the Passover, and then there were many in the assembly that had not set themselves apart. They had not cleansed themselves. So, as far as cleansing, it makes me think of like in the book of Leviticus that they were not in a perfect state. They probably had leprosy or some kind of skin disease or some kind of, the clothes had mildew or the house or whatever it may be. Just read the book of Leviticus and you'll see like all the things that could make people unclean, right? So that they would not be set apart. So for many of the people from Ephraim and Manasseh and Issachar and Zebulun, they had not been cleansed, yet they ate the Passover, contrary to what was written. right? So with everything that has to do with Yah is supposed to be perfect, complete perfection. Like there is no, just complete absolute perfection. He created everything perfectly because he is perfect. So despite the fact that they were not cleansed, Hezekiah, prayed to Yah, and it says that and Yah listened to Hezekiah and he healed the people so that they continued, to celebrate the Passover. And the thing is, they were so excited and so happy about finally celebrating the Passover. They extended it, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, for 7 more days. Because, the Passover and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I believe it's like 8 days. But they were like, you know what? We're having such a good time. Like, this is a whole party. Like, no, let's extend this thing like 7 more days. Let's continue to enjoy, each other's company and worship and sing and praise because again, they hadn't had Passover in long, so long. Because if you read Second Chronicles, even if you go back and read First and Second Kings, Second Chronicles, where Hezekiah is, that's towards the end of the sovereigns of Yasharel. There had been kings before him in between the time of David and Solomon and Hezekiah. There had been kings. So it had been a long time. And it's just like they were excited, and this is like a different generation, right? People weren't living as long as people were in the book of Genesis and Exodus and things like that. They weren't living that long. So this is a whole new generation of people. And Hezekiah was like, no, I want to do like my fathers did. I don't want this to be like that. To be like, the kings that came before me who were doing evil. But then, Hezekiah, he got beside himself. He got beside himself in all of him doing right. You know, um, they had all kinds of provisions. It got to the point where the priests were like, we can't take any more. We cannot take any more offerings. We can't take any more of the first fruits. There's way too much. They were so blessed because they followed the law and did as Yah said. But with that, Hezekiah let it go to his head. And there were some strangers that came into the land. And what did Hezekiah do? He showed them all that he had in all of his house. He showed off everything. And it's just like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? You can't do that, right? And he just wanted to show off everything that he had, but he should not have. And that's what happens when you fall out of Yah's perfection and fall into disobedience. So when you're obedient to Yah, that means that you are following the law, statutes, and commandments perfectly. People always talk about you can't be perfect. There's no such thing as being perfect. That is not true. Yah is perfect and he created us in his image. Therefore, we are to be perfect like he is. We are to be holy like he is. I think people get that, misconstrued. They think that nobody can be perfect because they themselves cannot be perfect and they fall short of perfection. But that has nothing to do with the next person. Just because you fall short of perfection does not mean that the next person cannot be perfect, right? So, anyway, Hezekiah, he ended up dying, okay? And then the next king was Manasseh, who was 12 when he began to reign. And he did evil in the eyes of Yah. Now, let me back up. Hezekiah tore down all the altars, he tore down all the carved images, he removed all the defilement and abominations that were in the temple. Manasseh, what did he do? The opposite. He rebuilt them, right? It says, for again, chapter 33, he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down and raised up slaughter places for the Baals and made Asherim and bowed himself to all the host of the heavens and served them. And he built slaughter places in the house of Yah, of which Yah had said, in Jerusalem is my name forever. And he built slaughter places for all the host of the heavens and the 2 courtyards for the house of Yah. And he made his sons pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom, which means that he sacrificed his children to Moloch. And I don't remember if it was in Isaiah or Jeremiah, but Yah was speaking through one of them, and he said, y'all sacrificed your children in the fire, which is something that I hadn't even fathomed telling y'all to do. But that's what he did. And he practiced magic and used divination and witchcraft and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much in evil in the eyes of Yah to provoke him. He placed a carved image of the idol which he had made in the house of Elohim, of which Elohim had said to David and to Shalom, which is Solomon, his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Yasharel, I put my name forever, and no more shall I remove the foot of Yasharel from the soil which I have appointed for your fathers, only if you guard to do all that I have commanded them, according to all the Torah and the laws and the right rulings by the hand of Moses. So I will not remove y'all from this land, but y'all have to stick to these laws, statutes, and commandments and do all of them. That is perfection. Perfection is not only holding some of them, only doing some of them. No, perfection is you need to do all of them. All that I have commanded, all of it has to be done. They did not do that. Manasseh, he refused to humble himself before Yah. And so, no, they were cursed, right? And so then he died, right? And then his son, Amon, was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of Yah, as his father Manasseh had done. And Amon slaughtered to all the carved images which his father Manasseh had made and served them. And he did not humble himself before Yah, as his father Manasseh had humbled himself. For Amon trespassed more and more, so he did worse. And that's the thing about these kings, is that when one does evil and trespass, they do worse than the one before. But then you have the good ones who are perfect. Who are perfect. I mean, some of them get beside themselves, they be tripping. But they are perfect. So the next one, Josiah, he was 18 when he began to reign, and he did what was right in the eyes of God and walked in the ways of his father David and did not turn aside right or left. He walked on the straight and narrow, perfection. And that is the thing. We have to walk on the straight and narrow and be perfect. The reason that we have such a hard time is because we're not fully willing to commit and be all in for Yah and give up our flesh. We're not willing to die to our flesh daily. We want the pleasures that sin brings. We want the pleasures that disobedience brings, because those pleasures are more important to us than the will of Yah. And you can't be like that. If you want to be perfect and make it into the kingdom, you have to be perfect and do his laws, statutes, and commandments. And the thing about Josiah is that in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the Elohim of his father David. And in the 12th year, he began to cleanse out Yehuda and Jerusalem from the high places and their shurim and carved images and the molded images. They broke down the slaughter places of the Baals in his presence, and the sun pillars which were above them he cut down, and the shurim and the carved images and the molded images he smashed and ground them up, strewed it on the surface of the burial sites of those who had slaughtered to them, right? The people who had been defiling the house of Yah, they put those ashes on their burial sites. Listen, listen, talk about petty, okay? Petty. And he burned the bones of the priests on their slaughter places and cleansed Yehuda and Jerusalem, and in the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim and Simon as far as Naphtali, in their ruins all around. And he broke down the slaughter places and the shurim and ground the carved images into dust and cut down all the sun pillars throughout all the land of Yasharel and returned to Jerusalem. In the 18th year, he had cleansed the land, right? Cleansed the whole land. And this is where he also did like Hezekiah did, got all the Levites together, got all the priests, cleansed the house, did the sacrifices and the offerings like they were supposed to do. He had all of the singers, he had all of the people who played the instruments and everything like that. And then while they were cleaning the temple, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the Torah of Yah given by Moshe, and he gave it to Shaphan, who gave it to Josiah. And Josiah, of course, tore his robes because he was like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And this is when I also found out that there was another prophetess mentioned. Her name is Huldah. And Hilkiah and those of the sovereign went to her and they asked her, like, hey, what's up with this? And she said, thus said Yah, Elohim of Yasharel, say to the man who sent you to me, thus said Yah, see, I am bringing evil on this place and on its inhabitants, all the curses that are written in the book, which they have read before the sovereign of Yahudah. So this is the thing. And I'm pretty sure that they read Deuteronomy, and that's why he tore his robes, because he was like, all these curses, I'm bringing on y'all. But I'm going to wait until after you have died, Josiah. I'm going to wait till you have died peacefully, and then I'm bringing on all these curses. Right? Now, here's the thing. Josiah got beside himself, right? So there was the Pharaoh of Egypt who came and was about to, lay siege to another city. Josiah did not mind his business. Okay? He did not mind his business, and the king told him, he was like, why are you here? I'm not here to fight with you. This is not your business. But what did Josiah do? He didn't listen, and the king told him, Elohim told me he sent me here to lay siege to this city. Why are you here? Leave Elohim alone and go back to what you were doing. Josiah didn't listen. He decided to fight against him, and he got wounded and he died. And that's when, Yah was like, I'm going to lay hands on all these people. Y'all are about to feel these curses. Exactly. So after Josiah had died, his son, Jehoahaz, Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, set up to reign in his father's place. And you know what? He did evil in the sight of Yah. He did. He did evil in the sight of Yah. Nebuchadnezzar was a sovereign of Babel at this time, came up against him, bound him in bronze shackles, and took him away to Babel. So because you didn't do right, he came and got you and took you to Babel, right? And so then after him was Jehoiakim, his son, who reigned, and he also did evil in the eyes of Yah. And Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babel with the valuable utensils from the house of Yah, and made Hezekiah, or is it Zedekiah, Jehoiakim's brother, sovereign over Yehudah and Jerusalem. So Zedekiah was 21 years old. And what did he do? He did evil in the eyes of Yah. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke from the mouth of Yah. He also rebelled against sovereign Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by Elohim, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to Yah, Elohim of Yasharel. And all the heads of the priests and the people trespassed more and more, according to all the abominations of the nations, and they defiled the house of Yah, which he had set apart in Jerusalem. And Elohim of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up early and sending to them, for he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they were mocking the messengers. So they mocked the angels, right? The angels that God sent to them to have them stop doing what they were doing. They mocked them. And I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, I bet you if he would have sent Michael, who was the angel of war, they would have got some act right. But they didn't. They did all these, they did worse than all the other nations. And it's just like, what is wrong with y'all? But that is the thing. When it comes to being perfect in Yah, you see like all the blessings that happen. If you read the Bible, you see all the people who did right in the eyes of Yah were perfect. And he blessed them immensely. Immensely. So the questions that I had asked in my dream was, what was the time that you had tried to be perfect? And the other question was to give an example of what the outcome would be if they went about the situation a different way. If you had tried to be perfect and it didn't work, why? If you had gone about it a different way, what would the outcome have been? So you see how these kings went about reigning in different ways, and you see the outcome of each, right? You see the ones who are perfect, but then what did they do? They got sidetracked and they did something they weren't supposed to be doing. Hezekiah and Josiah were doing great, but then they got a big head. They got beside themselves, decided not to mind their business, and decided to show everybody their business. And that's what happened. So perfection, you can be perfect. And don't let anyone tell you that you cannot be perfect, that perfection is not a real thing. It is. It absolutely is. There's plenty of examples in the Bible.